A tree can grow tall and imposing, with branches that seem to touch the sky. For those who look from afar, its grandeur is unquestionable. But when the winds of the storm blow, its shallow root is revealed. What seemed unshakable collapses with a single blow of the force that comes from above. This is the one who builds his life on manipulation, control, and lies. The narcissist may think he is invincible, but his foundation is weak. And when God's justice is manifested, everything he has built crumbles like sand in the wind. Have you ever pondered why certain individuals seem to prosper despite causing suffering in their wake? Why do individuals who deceive, manipulate, and exploit others persist, while their victims struggle to rebuild their lives? The Bible provides the answer. A man will reap the consequences of his actions. No work of deception goes unnoticed before God's eyes. The narcissist believes that he can act without consequences. He dresses in humility, but in his heart, he sees himself as a king. He seduces, convinces, and imposes himself. He controls his narrative with cunning, causing others to doubt what is true and believe the twisted version he presents. But pride always moves in the direction of falling. He may escape the truth for a time. He may manipulate circumstances and appear untouchable, but he cannot escape God's justice. When the storm comes, it doesn't matter how many followers he has, how many beautiful words he wears, or how many masks he wears. God sees beyond the surface. He examines the heart and weighs the intentions. And he who sows destruction will reap devastation. Galatians 6:7 is not a suggestion, it is a promise. Perhaps you have felt the weight of a narcissist's words and actions. Perhaps he was the target of lies, manipulation, or betrayal. But there's something you need to know. The narcissist's power isn't real. His strength may seem high now, but everything without God's support will fail. But before we talk about how God intervenes, we need to understand the narcissist's strategy. How does he arrest his victims? How do your tactics repeat themselves almost predictably? And more importantly, how can we identify the cycle before it destroys us? Before we continue, write in the comments, God's justice always prevails, and no lie will remain hidden. Spread this message to empower more people with the truth, encourage them to subscribe to the channel, and receive more inspirational reflections. Let's go to the video. The narcissist refrains from acting impulsively. He follows a cycle, repeating the same tactics with different people, always with the same goal: control. It all starts with a carefully calculated game of seduction. He presents himself as the best person we have ever met. His attention is intense, his praise is constant, and his words sound like divine promises. He makes us believe that we are special, chosen, and unique. But this admiration is not real. It's a trap. The manipulation begins subtly. The narcissist studies every detail, learning what moves us, what touches us, and what makes us feel valued. With this information in hand, he creates the perfect illusion, adjusting his personality to fit exactly what we want to see. What looks like love, however, is nothing more than a tool to trap the victim. As Proverbs 26:28 warns us, a lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth leads to ruin. Love bombing is not an expression of affection, but rather a strategy to achieve a specific goal. However, the illusion has a finite lifespan. Gradually, the mask begins to fall. The victim's emotional involvement eliminates the narcissist's need to pretend. Now, he can impose his true control. Small contradictions arise. What was once certainty now becomes doubt. He denies things he said before, distorts conversations, and reinterprets situations. When confronted, he reverses the narrative. You're exaggerating. That never happened. You always imagine things. This strategy has a name: gaslighting. The goal is not just to lie, but to make the victim doubt their own perception. Gradually, her reality becomes dependent on the narcissist's version. She feels insecure, questions her own sanity, and, without realizing it, gives him authority over her worldview. God, however, is not a God of confusion. He does not work in doubt, but in truth and peace. Therefore, whenever a relationship leads us to constantly question our worth and our mental clarity, there is a warning sign. No divine bond is based on manipulation. But the narcissist's game doesn't end in confusion. If the victim begins to notice the patterns, if he tries to free himself or question the control imposed on him, the narcissist enters his most dangerous phase. The tone changes. Words that were once sweet now become threatening. He may try to destroy the victim's reputation, spread lies, and seek allies to reinforce his version of the story. If he can no longer manipulate it directly, he will use any means to destabilize it. And if the victim still remains firm, he will play the victim, present himself as wronged, and seek to generate guilt to keep him imprisoned. But God sees everything. No scheme of the enemy escapes the gaze of the righteous one. Isaiah 54:17 declares that no weapon forged against his children will prosper. The narcissist can try to destroy, but he has no power in the face of divine justice. But if the narcissist's attacks are so well planned, how can we beat them? The answer lies in understanding that this struggle goes beyond the natural. The narcissist not only targets the mind and emotions, but also engages in spiritual warfare. The abuse he inflicts is not limited to psychological manipulation, but operates on a much deeper level. It is spiritual warfare. He doesn't just want to control actions or thoughts, he wants to destroy the victim's identity, steal their hope, and turn them away from God's truth. This does not happen directly, but through subtle strategies. It plants doubts about the victim's worth, makes her question her capacity for discernment, and isolates her emotionally. Gradually, the victim feels lost, disconnected from God, and confused about his faith. And that's where the real danger begins. The narcissist doesn't just want to be admired, he wants to be adored. He desires that his words have more authority than divine truth. The narcissist positions himself as an almost messianic figure. At first, he may even use God's name, quote verses, and feign spirituality to gain the victim's trust. But his real goal is not to lead anyone to Christ, but to replace him. He wants his approval to be more important than anything. If the victim begins to question or strengthen spiritually, he diverts his focus, generates fear, creates confusion, and does everything to weaken his connection with God. This is an old tactic. Since the beginning of mankind, the enemy has used the same strategy, distorting the truth so that people will doubt God. In Eden, Satan did not appear as a frightening monster. He presented himself as someone trustworthy, someone who knew more than God. He planted doubt with a question: is that really what God said? Genesis 3:1. The narcissist follows this same model. It devalues the victim's faith, questions their beliefs, makes them feel inadequate, and ultimately seeks to break their spirit. He creates an environment where God seems distant and silent, while his own voice becomes the loudest in the victim's mind. But God has not called us into emotional bondage. He did not make us live under manipulation. He equipped us to resist. Ephesians 6:11 instructs us to equip ourselves with the entire armor of God, enabling us to withstand the devil's tricks. This battle is not won with arguments or direct confrontations, but with truth, prayer, and discernment. The good news is that God never leaves his children helpless. The narcissist may be cunning, but he is not sovereign. He can deceive for a time, but he cannot deceive God. And when the battle seems lost, that's when God intervenes. The narcissist can manipulate people, distort stories, and deceive those around him. But there is one thing he will never be able to control: God's intervention. He may seem powerful for a while. He may construct a compelling narrative and keep his facade intact, but nothing escapes the eyes of the one who sees all things. When God chooses to act, no lie holds, no deception remains hidden, and no manipulation can resist his truth. Just as God saw Joseph suffering, betrayed by his own brothers, and cast into a well, he sees every tear shed by those who were hurt by wickedness disguised as love. But Joseph did not get stuck at the bottom of that well. God not only revealed the truth, but also turned his pain into a testimony of victory. And this is exactly how he acts against the narcissist's strategies. The narcissist lives in the darkness of lies. He builds a world where he is the hero and the victim is the culprit. He spreads half-truths, distorts the facts, and deceives those around him to protect his image. But God does not allow lying to prevail forever. Over time, what is hidden comes to light. Masks fall, stories contradict each other, and the illusion shatters. God acts as light in the midst of darkness, exposing what was previously hidden. Luke 8:17 assures us, "There's nothing hidden that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known and brought to light." The truth always finds a way, but just knowing it is not enough. When the reality of abuse becomes clear, it takes more than revelation. It takes deliverance. And often this liberation comes unexpectedly. Sometimes the door that closes is God's answer. The person who walks away, the relationship that breaks down, the situation that feels like loss, all can be part of God's plan to remove the oppressor from the path. The narcissist's withdrawal may seem painful, but it is protection. The Lord acts in ways that we don't always understand right away because his vision goes beyond ours. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways." Deliverance may not happen the way you expect, but it will always happen. And when God takes someone out of the bondage of an abusive relationship, he doesn't leave them empty. He rebuilds what was destroyed, strengthens what was weakened, and restores what seemed lost. Clarity that once seemed impossible is beginning to emerge. Fear is dissolved. The certainty that God is in control grows. Where there was previously confusion, there is now peace. And God doesn't just reveal the truth and drive away the oppressor, he also strengthens the victim. After a period of manipulation, it is common to feel lost and insecure, not knowing who to trust. But God restores mental clarity, courage, and discernment. He reminds us of who you really are. 2 Timothy 1:7 states, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind." It transforms pain into growth and weakness into strength. But after liberation, many face a new question: how to avoid falling into the same cycle again. Once you escape the clutches of a narcissistic relationship, something changes inside you. A shadow of fear descends, whispering that lowering your guard will lead to deception once more. You ask yourself, what if I don't notice the signs? What if I slip into the same trap? But God doesn't want you to live in fear. He wants you to move forward with wisdom, protecting your heart without hardening it, discerning without becoming a prisoner of distrust. The narcissist never acts at random. He studies, observes, and chooses his victims with precision. By understanding this pattern, you can spot it before it spreads again. Proverbs 4:23 warns us, "Above all things, guard your heart, for your whole life depends on it." This does not mean isolating yourself or rejecting new connections, but rather developing discernment to recognize the warning signs that reveal a toxic relationship. At first, everything seems perfect. The enchantment comes as an intense and enveloping wave. The person idealizes you, puts you on a pedestal, and praises every detail as if it were the best thing that ever happened to you. But notice, true love does not need manipulative exaggerations. He is firm, steadfast, and does not need urgency to prove himself. If someone wants to become indispensable in your life very quickly and pushes for intimacy that should be built over time, stop and observe. Haste never comes from God. Then comes the next phase. Small contradictions appear. The person who claimed to care begins to act selfishly. But when you try to talk about it, she reverses the situation, plays the victim, and blames others. He never admits his mistakes. He never asks for forgiveness in a genuine way. If something goes wrong, it's due to your misinterpretation, your exaggerated reaction, or your unfairness. And so, little by little, you feel that you need to justify the truth to someone who never takes responsibility for their own actions. And there are those who talk about God easily, quote verses, and say they have faith. But true spirituality is not in words, it is in fruits. Don't be fooled by beautiful speeches and empty promises. Those who truly love God reflect this in their attitudes, not just in their words. Discernment does not mean living suspiciously, it means trusting that God always gives signs to those who ask for wisdom. When you seek His direction, He teaches you to see beyond appearances, to perceive hidden intentions, and to walk without fear. But to avoid these relationships, it's essential to remember who you really are in God's eyes. Knowing your worth allows you to accept no less than what He has for you. The greatest damage a narcissist can do is not through offensive words or visible manipulation. It's in what he silently steals, his identity. He doesn't just want to control actions, he wants to redefine who you are. Gradually, it erases your self-confidence, distorts your perception, and makes you doubt your own essence. You fail to recognize your voice, your dreams, and your strengths. The repeated lies suffocate you, turning the person you used to be into a blur. But God has never allowed a worldly label to define His children. He never lost sight of who you really are. The narcissist may have made you feel small, but God calls you chosen. The enemy may have tried to extinguish your light, but God says you were created to shine. The narcissist's manipulation operates through repetition. He persuades you of your inadequacy, your weakness, and your lack of true love or value. Over time, you come to believe these lies because you have heard them so many times that you have begun to accept them as truth. But what does God say about you? What does He say about your identity? 1 Peter 2:9 states, "You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people." You are not the result of what they put you through. You are not a mistake. You are not what the narcissist made you believe. You are chosen, separated, and loved. When God restores, He doesn't just give back what was stolen, it transforms. He wants to strengthen you and help you understand your purpose, not just restore you after the abuse. He doesn't want you to carry the pain, but rather the learning. Because you are not the victim of history, you are the living testimony of God's faithfulness. Recovery does not happen overnight. On certain days, the reverberation of the past persists, attempting to drag you back into a state of agony. However, God is gradually rebuilding everything. Each time you choose to believe what He says about you, a chain breaks. Each time you see yourself as God sees you, a little more of the truth settles in your heart. But what if the narcissist comes back asking for forgiveness? How to discern if the change is real? He always comes back. Regardless of the harm he inflicted or the scars he left behind, he always returns. The narcissist returns as if nothing had happened, with well-rehearsed words and a regretful look. He says that he has changed, that he now understands everything, that things will be different. He dresses in humility, asks for a new chance, and promises that he will never repeat the same mistakes again. But is this true? The mind wants to believe. The heart, still laden with scars, hesitates. Could it be that he is revealing the truth this time? What if, deep down, there really is a chance of redemption? But the Bible has already warned us, a fool repeats his folly like a dog returning to its vomit. Words are not proof of change. Emotional speeches do not mean repentance. True transformation does not need to be announced. It is perceived. The narcissist feels your absence, but not because he regretted what he did. He misses the control, the power he wielded, the way his presence fed him. If an apology was enough to change someone, no one would need character, only good words. But the reality is different. Real repentance bears fruit. At first, he will try as he always has. His words will come loaded with emotion. His gaze will reflect fragility. If you see that this doesn't work, you'll change your approach. Perhaps he adopts a victim role, claiming that no one believes him and that he is being wronged. If necessary, he will find excuses to justify what he did. A difficult childhood, unresolved traumas, a moment of weakness. The problem will never be entirely his. There will always be a shadow of guilt that he will try to transfer. He can say that God is changing his heart, that he is now a different person, that he has realized everything he has done wrong. He can use verses, he can present himself as someone who has learned his lesson, and he can even attend a church to prove that he really is trying to be a better person. However, genuine transformation does not require a stage for recognition. Real repentance does not come with haste. He does not despair of rapprochement. He does not demand that trust be restored immediately. He understands that the damage done cannot be erased with words, and that forgiveness, while divine, does not mean that history must repeat itself. The Bible teaches that we should produce fruit worthy of repentance. A truly transformed heart does not care about convincing others of its change. It just lives that change day after day. True repentance accepts the consequences. He understands that he hurt, destroyed, and broke trust. He doesn't push for a second chance because he knows that trust is not required. It is built. Those who have truly transformed their lives do so without the need for external validation. And there is something even more important. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Jesus taught us to forgive, but he also warned us about those who do not show transformation. Forgiveness sets you free, but it doesn't require you to put yourself back in the same cycle of pain. God does not call us to continual suffering, but to wisdom. The real danger lies not in the narcissist's regret, but in the illusion that he is real. If a door has been closed by God, to insist on reopening it is to risk going back to a place of destruction. Don't confuse compassion with blindness. Don't confuse love with tolerance of abuse. God does not call us to return to what he himself has set us free from. Now that we understand the danger of the narcissist's return, we need to talk about God's justice and his judgment against those who practice evil. He thinks he is untouchable. He goes through life manipulating, deceiving, and destroying things without ever looking back. He believes that he is above the consequences, that his intelligence and his control game will always give him a way out. He sees himself as someone special, unique, and above others, and in his mind, no one can bring him down. But there is something he ignores, the justice of God. For a while it seems that he thrives. He moves forward without facing the consequences of what he has done, gains more influence, and surrounds himself with people who believe his lies. He believes that he has triumphed, that he has successfully deceived everyone, and that he will never bear the consequences of his actions. But the Bible is clear. Pride goes before destruction, and arrogance goes before a fall. Lais, the narcissist, does not see his own ruin approaching. He confuses divine patience with impunity. He believes he has escaped punishment, yet God's justice is unwavering. History consistently recurs. The Pharaoh who oppressed God's people believed himself to be an untouchable God, but he was swallowed up by the sea. Haman intended to destroy Mordecai, but he ended up hanging from the very trap he had set. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, but ultimately they had to submit to the very person they attempted to destroy. Pride blinds. It gives the false feeling that nothing can bring down the one who exalts himself. But God resists the proud and exalts the humble. The narcissist plants destruction wherever he goes, and every word, every lie, and every betrayal turns into a seed. But the harvest always comes. He can escape for a time, he can deceive many, but he cannot deceive God. No tear shed goes unnoticed. No injustice committed goes unanswered. He mocked the pain of others, ridiculed those who believed in his mask, and played on the emotions of those who only wanted to love him. He destroyed it without remorse, believing that his actions would never come back to him. However, he also reaps the consequences of his actions. God's justice does not always come in the time we expect, nor in the way we imagine, but it always comes. The narcissist's undoing begins the moment he becomes convinced that nothing can bring him down. His arrogance prevents him from realizing that he himself is digging his own downfall. He destroys everything around him and, in the end, finds himself surrounded only by the rubble of his own wickedness. God doesn't need anyone to try to fix the narcissist. The fight is not ours. He sees everything and acts at the right time. His justice is perfect, for it is not based only on what is apparent, but on what is hidden. He weighs intentions, examines hearts, and knows thoughts. There is no lie that can deceive him, nor argument that can manipulate him. When God acts, there is no one who can stop him. The narcissist thinks he can manipulate the world to his advantage, but he cannot manipulate the Most High. God watches him in silence, allowing him to move forward, giving him time for repentance. But when that time runs out, the fall comes. Everything based on deception crumbles when divine justice manifests. What seemed like a safe fortress turns out to be a sandcastle. He may try to escape, he may seek new victims, he may even reinvent his image, but there is no way out for the one who has set himself against God. If you've ever been the target of a narcissist's lies and destruction, don't despair. You don't need to bear the burden of seeking retribution. You don't have to wait anxiously to see his ruin. The work of justice is not yours, it is God's. He sees what you don't see. He knows what you don't. He has already written the end of this story. But God doesn't just do justice. He also heals and restores those who have been injured. God's justice is certain. He witnesses every tear shed, every betrayal endured, and every cruel word used to destroy innocent hearts. But God is not just a God of justice. He is also a God of restoration. He seeks not only to right the wrongs inflicted upon you, but also to genuinely heal you from the core. The wound left by the narcissist is not superficial. It is not something that fades over time, because it was not just a passing offense, but a continuous process of destruction. He made you doubt who you were, undermined your confidence, and made you believe that maybe it was never enough. He didn't just destroy his peace, he tried to rewrite his identity. He didn't fix this with empty words, nor did time pass without purpose. The pain of an abusive relationship is not limited to memories. It infiltrates the decisions of the present, future relationships, the way you see yourself, and how you see the world. Even after the narcissist's departure, the consequences of his actions may persist, silent and concealed in the depths of your soul. But God doesn't want you to just survive what you've been through. He wants to restore you completely. The first step to healing is not forgetting, it's delivering. Bitterness wants to keep you stuck in the past. She whispers that you need justice, that you can only move on when you see the one who hurt you paying for what they did. She persuades you to view your pain as an unpaid debt and insist on waiting for its repayment. But the truth is, bitterness doesn't imprison the one who hurt you, it imprisons you. God doesn't want you to carry that burden. He doesn't want you to waste days, months, or years feeding thoughts about the past. He wants you to surrender that pain to Him. He already has justice in His hands, and He never fails. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "All things work together for good to those who love God." This doesn't mean that everything that happened was good, but it does mean that God can transform even the most painful experiences into growth, strength, and a new purpose. Healing does not mean that pain never existed. It means that it no longer defines its history, but restoring yourself after emotional abuse is not a one-time event, it's a process. This path necessitates patience, faith, and a daily decision to not look back. Maybe some memories still hurt, perhaps fear still tries to whisper that if you let your guard down, anything can happen again. Perhaps your confidence in yourself has been so eroded that you can't see a future without carrying the shadow of what you've experienced. But each day you choose to trust God, He heals a little more. God did not create you to live in ruins. He doesn't want you to pick up the pieces and rebuild afterward. He wants to rebuild His life with His own hands, not only restoring what was lost, but bringing something even greater. Because God never gives back something in the same measure, He always gives it back multiplied. It heals your mind so that you can see things clearly again. He heals your emotions so that you can feel joy again without fear. He heals your heart so that one day you can trust without carrying the weight of distrust. But there is a choice that only you can make. Now that we know how God works, we need to decide: stay in the past or walk in the freedom He gives us. You're not alone. God saw every pain you endured, every betrayal that hurt you, every tear that fell into silence. He knows the weight you've carried, the nights with no answers, the moments you thought you'd never heal. But here's the truth: God fights for you. From the first moment, He was by their side, preparing the way for their deliverance. Perhaps the process was painful. Perhaps for a while it seemed that the narcissist won, that his wickedness went unpunished, and that the damage was irreversible. However, God consistently prevails in battles. He saw it all. He did not ignore their pain, nor did He close His eyes to injustices. He acted at the right time, with the precision of His justice and with the power of His restoration. And now, the decision is before you. Look back or move on. The past has tried to define you, but God has already decreed a new future for you. The lie has tried to imprison you, but God's truth has already set you free. Pain tried to silence your voice, but God called you to live to the fullest. Victory has already been decreed. The narcissist no longer has power over you. What he tried to destroy, God is already rebuilding. What he wanted to steal, God is giving back. Now it is your turn to declare that truth. Write in the comments, "God fights for me and I walk in His freedom." Let that statement echo within you. Each time you declare this, you reaffirm your faith, your worth, and your purpose. And if this message has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is still stuck in this cycle. Someone who needs to remember that God is greater than any oppressor. God's justice does not fail. The restoration has already begun, and the best is yet to come.